Trump's terrible secrets from past covered up by FBI. When the shadows of the past creep into the heart of American power. In the world of politics where every move is calculated, every word is measured, and every action leaves a trace sometimes, what isn't said can be far more dangerous than any accusation. Donald J. Trump, a name that once shook the foundations of America with the slogan "Make America Great Again," is once again at the center of attention, not on a campaign stage, but at the eye of a rising storm of secrets. Trump's terrible secrets from past covered up by FBI isn't just a shocking headline, it's a looming question mark over the very integrity of American democracy. What happens when one of the most powerful men in the world holds a past so dark that even the FBI, one of the nation's top law enforcement agencies, is accused of deliberate silence? This question doesn't just point to personal misdeeds. It opens the door to a deeper truth that power can distort reality, and that some secrets must never see the light of day if they threaten the foundation of an entire political empire. Controversies have always followed Trump, from investigations into Russian interference, financial scandals, to deeply personal allegations that never fully surfaced. But when these aren't just buried, they're allegedly buried with the help of the FBI, the story becomes bigger than Trump himself. It becomes a matter of public trust in justice. Is there an invisible hand manipulating the truth? Do these secrets hold the power to shatter Trump's image among his supporters? And more importantly, are we living in a time where truth is no longer free, but controlled by power? Let us step into part 2, where we begin to uncover the terrible secrets the media won't talk about, and where the FBI, are they truly guardians of justice, or keepers of a far more terrifying truth? 2. Trump's financial maze. When wealth is just an illusion. For years, Donald J. Trump has crafted the image of a successful billionaire, a self-made man who built an empire through sheer business savvy. But behind the glittering facade lies a tangled financial web, cloaked in secrecy and riddled with unanswered questions. Among the many terrible secrets believed to have been hidden by the FBI, his financial history and alleged tax evasion stand as some of the most suspicious and dangerous pieces of the puzzle. From the outset of his 2015 presidential campaign, Trump broke with decades of tradition by refusing to release his tax returns, citing an ongoing audit as his excuse. Yet financial experts were quick to call this reasoning into question, suspecting it was a convenient shield rather than a legitimate cause for delay. In 2020, the New York Times published a bombshell investigation revealing that Trump had paid only $750 in federal income tax in both 2016 and 2017. Worse, he paid no income tax at all in 10 of the previous 15 years, claiming massive business losses. The question, then, is how could a self-proclaimed billionaire with a vast portfolio of hotels, golf courses, and real estate consistently report losses year after year? The answer lies in Trump's use of aggressive financial tactics, claiming depreciation on properties, disguising personal expenses like private jets and hairstyling as business costs, and funneling money through shell companies. These actions may not have been technically illegal, but they reveal how Trump exploited every loophole in the system to avoid his civic responsibilities. But this is not the most alarming part. The real danger lies in the hundreds of millions of dollars in debt Trump carried during his presidency, over $400 million due within his term. Who held these debts? Were they foreign entities? And if so, did those lenders have leverage over the President of the United States? Reports have suggested that Trump relied heavily on Deutsche Bank, one of the few financial institutions still willing to work with him despite its history of laundering money for Russian oligarchs. These ties sparked serious concerns over whether Trump might be subject to foreign influence through his financial obligations. Meanwhile, the FBI, the very agency tasked with protecting national security and rooting out threats, remained silent during the election cycle. Ironically, the same FBI had publicly reopened its investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails just days before the 2016 election, a move many later criticized as politically reckless. And yet, when it came to Trump's suspicious finances, the Bureau said nothing. Was this a case of institutional bias, or were there forces at play silencing the truth? Trump's financial story isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a warning sign of how transparency can vanish at the highest levels of power, and how the richest and most powerful are often the best equipped to hide the truth in plain sight. And when the institutions designed to hold them accountable like the FBI fail to speak out, or are suppressed by political pressure, the truth remains buried in the shadows. We must ask ourselves, in a democracy, if the person leading the nation can dodge taxes, hide debts, and never be forced to come clean, what hope is there for justice for the rest of us? Three, the invisible strings of power, Trump's shadowy ties to foreign forces. In today's political world, power is no longer wielded solely through armies or constitutions. It flows quietly through private meetings, undisclosed investments, and back-channel diplomacy. At the center of this silent web sits Donald J. Trump, a figure whose controversies go far beyond what is spoken aloud. Among the terrible secrets believed to have been shielded from the public eye, his connections to foreign powers may be the most dangerous and difficult to untangle. As early as his 2016 campaign, rumors of Trump's ties to Russia began to surface. Leaked emails, secret meetings between Trump's campaign officials and Russian intelligence figures, and FBI reports of election interference from Moscow ignited a wave of anxiety across America. Was the president truly serving the interests of the nation, or was he beholden to a foreign hand? The special counsel investigation led by Robert Mueller did not definitively conclude that Trump colluded with Russia. However, the 400-plus page report painted a troubling picture: dozens of suspicious contacts, deliberate obfuscation, and a campaign that appeared willing to accept outside assistance if it meant securing a win. But Russia was not the only country raising red flags. During and especially after his presidency, Trump and his inner circle developed increasingly close financial ties with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other Gulf nations. In the months following his departure from the White House, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund reportedly funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into real estate and private equity ventures led by Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. These investments could be viewed as typical post-presidency business deals. But when they involve a former commander-in-chief with deep knowledge of national security and intelligence operations, they become more than just economic exchanges. They raise questions of ethics. They whisper behind closed doors. "We invested in you, you owe us now." Even more concerning was Trump's unwavering public support for governments accused of human rights violations, especially those in the Middle East. After the brutal 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, while the world condemns Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Trump bluntly stated that he wouldn't jeopardize a tremendous weapons deal over one death. This wasn't simply a political stance, it signaled something deeper, a compromise of principle in favor of loyalty or debt. So where was the FBI amid these foreign entanglements? Why were there no explicit national security warnings regarding these transactions? Why weren't the numerous backdoor meetings between Trump's advisors and foreign envoys investigated publicly the way other scandals were? The answer may lie not within any one agency, but within the complex machinery of modern power where politics, money, and intelligence blend into a maze too intricate to trace. And within that maze, Trump may not merely be a player. He may be a pawn, or worse, a gateway through which global influence silently reshaped American policy. The real threat isn't just that a politician had foreign financial ties. The threat is when a man with access to classified secrets, military strategy, and diplomatic leverage is bound by obligations that remain invisible to the public, untouched by law, and protected from media scrutiny. In a world where new forms of Cold War are unfolding through data, oil, and capital, Trump's murky international ties are not a side story. They are a strategic vulnerability, a potential national security risk, and most dangerously, a sign that the line between statesman and businessman may no longer exist, leaving the soul of a nation quietly bartered away. 4. Fractures that cannot be denied. Trump's sexual scandals and the moral collapse of a president. In any functioning democracy, the personal morality of a nation's leader is not just a private matter, it is a mirror reflecting the values he brings to the nation. And when the person holding the highest office is entangled in a long list of allegations involving sexual misconduct, the degradation of women, and morally bankrupt statements, the question is no longer are these accusations true, but rather, why was he allowed to stay in power despite them? Donald Trump wasn't accused by one or two women. More than 25 women have come forward with allegations spanning over 4 decades. The accusers include models, journalists, former employees, and even women who say he assaulted them in something as mundane as an elevator. The stories share disturbing patterns, unwanted advances, power imbalance, and silence enforced by fear or legal pressure. One of the most high-profile cases is that of Young Carroll, a respected journalist. She accused Trump of raping her in a dressing room at the luxury department store Bergdorf Goodman in the 1990s. Trump denied the claim, saying he didn't know her, only for a photograph to emerge showing them at a social event together. In 2023, a New York civil court found Trump liable for sexual abuse and defamation, ordering him to pay over $5 million in damages. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. No one has forgotten the infamous 2005 Access Hollywood tape, where Trump proudly declared, "When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything ... grab them by the P***y**. This wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was a subconscious confession from a man who believed that power excused him from basic decency. What's perhaps more alarming is not the act itself, but the fact that instead of being condemned, he gained support from a segment of the public as if such behavior was nothing more than a locker room joke. So what did the FBI do? While the Bureau has aggressively investigated other political figures for much less, the accusations against Trump seem to fade into silence. There was no comprehensive federal investigation, no public warning about his conduct, no sustained criminal inquiry. Was this a deliberate omission? Or once again, was power louder than justice? The greatest danger isn't simply whether Trump committed these acts. The greater danger is that an entire system let them slide. It sent a chilling message. You can harass, coerce, and harm women as long as you're rich and powerful enough. When kindness is no longer a virtue, when abuse is excused by success, when a nation becomes numb to the unforgivable, that is not just the moral collapse of a single man, it is the decay of a political culture that has forgotten the line between instinct and civilization. 5. The shadows behind the ballot, fraud, incitement, and the day America turned on itself. January 6, 2021, a day forever etched as a scar on the conscience of American democracy. On what should have been a peaceful constitutional process like countless inaugurations before it, an angry mob, waving American flags, wearing red MAGA hats, and shouting distorted slogans of freedom, stormed the Capitol, smashing windows, threatening lawmakers, and halting the transfer of power. This was not the image of a country under foreign attack. It was the image of a democracy imploding from within, and more disturbingly, it was ignited by the words of a sitting president, Donald J. Trump. In the weeks following the November 2020 election, instead of accepting the results, a time-honored tradition anchoring peaceful transitions of power, Trump relentlessly declared the election stolen. Despite the absence of credible evidence, despite more than 60 lawsuits being dismissed in court, and despite bipartisan officials confirming the election's legitimacy, Trump refused to concede. He issued calls, sometimes veiled, often overt, urging his followers to fight like hell and to never concede. And when the crowd surged into the Capitol, he did not immediately condemn them. Instead, he told them, "We love you, you're very special." This was no longer politics, it was emotional manipulation, a denial of reality, and a deliberate stirring of collective rage aimed not at foreign enemies, but at the very system Trump had once sworn to protect. The aftermath was devastating. 5 people died. Hundreds were injured or arrested. The image of the world's oldest democracy shattered before a global audience. And most lasting of all, a nation fractured at its core. Meanwhile, The FBI faced intense criticism for failing to act decisively despite prior warnings of potential violence. Why did one of the world's most advanced intelligence agencies, with access to extensive surveillance tools, fail to prevent a public, well-coordinated assault organized on social media? Was it, once again, a case of power clouding perception? Did political hesitancy prevent the FBI from confronting a sitting president even as he threatened the foundations of democratic order? January 6th was not merely a riot, it was the culmination of a systematic assault on truth, a collapse of institutional transparency, and the unchecked expansion of political power. When a head of state weaponizes his followers' trust against his own country, it ceases to be a personal matter, it becomes a national rupture. And perhaps the most haunting truth is not what happened that day, but that millions of Americans still believe it was right. 6. The classified files at Mar-a-Lago. When a nation's secrets fall into one man's hands. In the landscape of American politics, one rule is sacrosanct. Classified national documents do not belong to any individual, not even a president. These are the most sensitive assets of the nation, holding intelligence data, security operations, nuclear strategies, and diplomatic secrets. Mishandling them is not merely an administrative error, it is a potential threat to national security. Yet when Donald Trump left the White House in January 2021, he took with him not only his political legacy, but hundreds of classified documents, many marked top secret. These were materials that should have remained locked away in the most secure facilities of the US government. The issue first came to light when the National Archives requested the return of official documents. After months of delay, Trump eventually handed back a portion, but he retained numerous boxes of documents at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, a location that lacked proper security clearance or protection. In August 2022, the FBI executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, recovering over 300 classified documents, some containing nuclear weapons data, intelligence from allied nations, and materials so sensitive that agents had to wear anti-static gloves to handle them. The concern wasn't just recklessness, it was intentionality. Trump was not merely in possession of the documents, he was accused of actively directing lawyers and staff to hide or relocate them, obstructing the government's efforts to retrieve its own secrets. Federal prosecutors eventually filed criminal charges, marking the first time in US history a former president has been indicted for mishandling classified information. Why did Trump keep these documents? Was it carelessness, or was there a motive? The more disturbing question is, were they ever shared, with whom, for what gain? The idea that a former president could store sensitive national secrets in a private residence, one frequented by club staff, accessible to guests, and previously targeted by hackers, is unprecedented. No healthy democracy can function when its most guarded intelligence is stashed in the basement of a luxury estate. Throughout the ordeal, the FBI found itself under fire, accused of politicizing its actions, of engaging in a witch hunt, even as it was the only agency to act to recover national security documents. The real question isn't whether the FBI should have acted, but rather, why did it take more than 18 months to intervene? This delay in responding to such a glaring threat raised concerns about political hesitancy, fear of confronting a powerful figure, and a growing erosion of public trust in the very institutions tasked with upholding the law. The classified files at Mar-a-Lago were not just a security mishap, they were a sobering reminder that, even after power leaves the White House, it can continue to endanger the nation if left unchecked. 7. When the commander-in-chief shows signs of instability, Trump's mind, mood, and authoritarian instincts. A president, regardless of political affiliation, must embody one essential quality above all: emotional stability and mental self-control. For in his hands lies not just legal authority, but the fate of a nation, the lives of millions, and at times, the balance of global peace. So what happens when the person holding the highest office in the land begins to exhibit signs of psychological imbalance, emotional volatility, and a public pattern of authoritarian behavior? With Donald Trump, these signs were not mere speculation, they were voiced by those who worked closest to him. From former National Security Advisor John Bolton to former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, to former Secretary of Defense James Mattis all publicly raised concerns about Trump's impulsive decisions, erratic mood swings, and volatile temperament. Multiple insider reports described Trump as frequently enraged by trivial matters: a critical news segment, a tweet from a rival, or a meeting that didn't follow his expectations. There were moments when he would reportedly slam phones, yell at staff, or even issue major military directives via Twitter without consulting the Pentagon. Senior officials admitted they had to quietly contain the damage every day, anticipating rash orders and correcting them behind the scenes. His authoritarianism also revealed itself in how he dismissed or humiliated those who disagreed with him, even slightly weather generals, heads of federal agencies, or members of his own party. Those who dared to challenge him quickly became targets of public humiliation, often through personal attacks on Twitter aimed at ruining reputations and careers. Amid all this, mental health professionals began to speak out. Hundreds of psychiatrists and psychologists signed public letters urging a psychiatric evaluation of the president. Some even called for invoking the 25th Amendment, which allows for the removal of a president deemed unfit to discharge the duties of office. Though no official diagnosis was ever made, Trump's public behavior raised serious questions across the globe. Did he truly grasp the consequences of his actions? Or was he governing by impulse, ego, and emotion rather than logic and principle? Even more troubling was the inability or unwillingness of the oversight system to intervene. Congress was bitterly divided, his cabinet largely fearful, and the FBI, if they did observe warning signs, never publicly voiced them. If an ordinary citizen showed signs of emotional instability, they might lose access to firearms or be subject to psychological evaluation. But when that person is President of the United States, they still hold the power to launch airstrikes, sign executive orders, and command the nuclear arsenal. And that may be the most frightening reality of all. Not just that one man acted impulsively, but that an entire system of power allowed him to wield that impulse unchecked. Eight, information warfare. When truth becomes a weapon and perception is bent. If the last century was defined by wars of weapons, then the 21st century belongs to wars of information where power lies not in bullets, but in the ability to control collective perception. If the last century was defined by wars of weapons, then the 21st century belongs to wars of information where power lies not in bullets, but in the ability to control collective perception. Donald J. Trump didn't just understand this truth, he weaponized it. From the moment he entered politics, Trump launched a relentless assault on the media, labeling major news outlets like CNN, The New York Times, and The Washington Post as fake news, and branding journalists as enemies of the people. This wasn't mere criticism, it was a deliberate strategy to undermine public trust in any source of truth that wasn't him. Instead of engaging in traditional press conferences, Trump turned to Twitter, where he spoke directly to over 88 million followers unfiltered and challenged. Each tweet was not just a message, it was an act of narrative control. If he claimed the election was stolen, millions believed it. If he called a journalist a traitor, threats against that journalist would follow. Truth was no longer objective, it became a commodity, malleable, usable, and disposable. Trump didn't just manipulate media, he turned falsehood into identity. Fact-checkers revealed that during his presidency, he made over 30,000 false or misleading statements. And yet, instead of losing credibility, he gained more admiration from his base, who viewed him as a martyr hunted by the system. This is the dangerous paradox of the post-truth era. The more he was exposed, the more he was praised. The more he was contradicted, the more his supporters believed only he told the truth. So where was the FBI and other oversight agencies in this information war? as Trump used social media to spread conspiracy theories, stir division, attack judges, and distort facts behaviors that directly led to real-world consequences like the January 6th Capitol riot. Why was there no immediate warning, penalty, or institutional counterbalance? Perhaps the system was too outdated to contain a president who governed like an influencer, using memes instead of policy, hashtags instead of official declarations. The suppression of truth, distortion of facts, and incitement of mob mentality are no longer personal behaviors. They represent a new model of power, one where controlling perception becomes the ultimate tool of manipulation. And Trump understood and executed that model more effectively than any leader who ever sat in the Oval Office. 9. When silence speaks louder than words, the FBI and the cracks in transparency. The FBI, long seen as a symbol of justice, neutrality, and elite investigative power, found its credibility shaken during the Trump years. Not because it said something wrong, but because, as many critics argue, it remained silent when the truth demanded to be spoken. The alleged cover-up was not the overt destruction of documents or the forging of evidence. It was something far more insidious, a selective approach to action, and a bias in the timing and disclosure of critical information. Perhaps the clearest example of this imbalance was the FBI's contrasting treatment of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. In late October 2016, just days before the election, then FBI Director James Comey publicly announced the reopening of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server, sparking media uproar and, many believe, decisively affecting the election outcome. At the very same time, the FBI was quietly conducting a preliminary investigation into potential ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, but chose to keep that probe completely under wraps. This asymmetry begs a serious question: why was potentially damaging information about one candidate made public, while even more serious concerns about the other were withheld? After Trump took office, warning signs continued to surface, from his refusal to release tax records, to multiple allegations of sexual misconduct, to what appeared to be interference in ongoing federal investigations, such as when Trump reportedly urged the FBI director to let go of the probe into Michael Flynn. That same director was later fired. Yet rather than respond with force or transparency, the FBI remained vague, avoiding direct confrontation, shielding internal deliberations, and maintaining a so-called professional silence, a posture that in normal times might signal caution, but in this context became a justification for inaction. The question is not whether the FBI had the evidence, it is: what did they know? When did they know it, and why didn't they act in time? In an era where information is a weapon, inaction itself becomes a form of complicity. And sometimes, silence is not neutral, it is a quiet agreement. The FBI's inconsistency in handling cases related to Trump did more than disappoint the public. It exposed a critical vulnerability in America's oversight systems. Because if even the most independent, powerful investigative agency can be bent or frozen under political pressure, then we must ask, who is left to protect the truth? "10. When controversy becomes reality, the events that can no longer be denied. In a world where doubt and conspiracy theories often blur the lines of political discourse, it's easy to dismiss serious accusations as partisan attacks or fabricated narratives. But in the case of Donald Trump, a long list of incidents once dismissed as rumors have since been confirmed, investigated, and etched into the official record of American history. The controversies surrounding Trump are no longer confined to whispers or speculation. They've been documented by journalists, examined in federal investigations, and even litigated in court. They raise not only questions about personal ethics, but also expose the alarming weaknesses within the systems meant to safeguard democracy and enforce the rule of law. In 2016, while the FBI was conducting an operation codenamed Crossfire Hurricane to examine potential ties between the Trump campaign and Russian officials, the public heard nothing. At the same time, just days before the election, FBI Director James Comey publicly announced the reopening of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, a move that shocked the nation and is widely believed to have influenced the election outcome. to candidates, to investigations, but to entirely different standards of transparency. The choice to reveal one and conceal the other shaped the opinions of millions, but that decision wasn't made by voters, it was made by a federal agency once assumed to be above politics. Meanwhile, Trump repeatedly refused to release his tax returns, breaking a decades-long tradition among US presidential candidates. It took nearly 4 years and a major media investigation before the public discovered that he had paid only $750 in federal income tax during his first year in office, and no taxes at all for the majority of the 15 years prior. For someone who claimed to be a billionaire, this was not just shocking, it challenged the very idea of transparency and fairness. Then came January 6, 2021, a day when American democracy trembled at its core. A crowd bearing Trump flags and red hats stormed the Capitol, convinced they were defending freedom from a stolen election, a claim Trump himself had relentlessly promoted without evidence. Rather than de-escalate the chaos, Trump offered a message of affection: "We love you, you're very special." This was no longer partisan rhetoric, it was a sitting president aligning himself with a violent insurrection. And just when it seemed nothing more could shake the system, the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case took the controversy to an unprecedented level. For the first time in US history, the FBI raided a former president's private residence to recover highly sensitive materials, including nuclear weapons documents that had been improperly stored for over a year. This raised grave national security concerns and sparked a fundamental question: was Trump using these secrets for personal or political gain? Across all these events, the role of the FBI has come under scrutiny. The Bureau, entrusted with defending the truth, has repeatedly acted slowly, remained silent, or appeared oddly restrained. It delayed action before the Capitol riot, failed to issue public warnings about national security risks, and didn't aggressively pursue signs of financial misconduct, leaving the press to uncover what it should have led. This points not just to a failure of one man, but to a systemic breakdown in oversight and accountability. Because when confirmed truths are still avoided, delayed, or treated with caution, controversy stops being something to investigate, it becomes a symbol of justice in retreat. When truth becomes a double-edged sword. The public impact of the Trump controversy. There is nothing more dangerous than a distorted truth or a lie that is believed with unwavering conviction. In this age of political polarization, the story of Donald Trump's terrible secrets, especially those allegedly covered up by the FBI, is not merely a political scandal. It has become a deep fracture in the American psyche, one that divides trust, shakes the public's faith in justice, and leaves lasting consequences on how citizens perceive their government and one another. For a significant portion of the public, the accusations against Trump are seen as nothing more than a modern-day witch hunt, the desperate attempts of a corrupt establishment to destroy a man who dared to defy the status quo. In their eyes, Trump is not the perpetrator, but the victim, a lone warrior standing against the massive machinery of the media, government, and the so-called deep state. The silence or sluggish response of the FBI in several high-profile matters only strengthens this belief, fueling the idea that the system is no longer trustworthy. Conversely, for the other half of the country, the story serves as a siren call for democracy in distress. They see a president who has violated ethical norms, undermined the rule of law, and manipulated truth, yet has not faced meaningful consequences. For them, Trump's continued evasion of accountability is not a sign of innocence, but a sign of how justice falters in the face of unchecked power. From these two irreconcilable views, a divided America has emerged, not just politically, but epistemologically. What is most dangerous is this: both sides believe they are defending democracy, and both believe the other side is the threat. In this context, public trust in institutions, media, Congress, and even the FBI has quietly but profoundly eroded. A culture of distrust toward all information sources, hostility toward dissenting opinions, and rejection of inconvenient truths has taken root. The story of Trump has not just wounded politics, it has damaged the architecture of collective trust, the very foundation of any functioning democracy. More importantly, it poses a question to every citizen. If the leader of the nation can live outside the norms and truth can be bent without consequence, what, then, is left to protect a country from collapsing from within? Conclusion: when truth is no longer enough, the story of Donald Trump, the alleged cover-ups, and the FBI's conflicted role is not just a string of isolated scandals. It is a mirror reflecting the deep fractures within modern American society between trust and doubt, between truth and manipulation, between the rule of law and the raw force of personal power. The most frightening part isn't what happened. It's how these patterns continue to repeat, again and again, in a system fatigued and a public deeply divided. And that's why we must start asking questions, not to destroy but to understand. Not to tear down but to rebuild the foundations of transparency, justice, and democracy. If you believe these insights matter and that the public deserves to know the truth, please support this work by subscribing to the channel today, turning on notifications so you don't miss the next video, sharing this content to bring light to untold perspectives. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Together, let's decode the truth and protect what still deserves to be defended. The content in this video is compiled from a variety of public sources, including media reports, investigative documents, social commentary, and political analysis platforms. Certain details are reenacted or dramatized for illustrative purposes and reflect the perspectives of various segments of society. We do not make any personal accusations or legal conclusions against any individuals, organizations, or events mentioned. Viewers are encouraged to critically evaluate the information, verify sources, and seek out diverse perspectives for a deeper understanding of the issues presented.